Welcome Naresh Technologies. This is Mahesh. So I'm preparing a video series on Flutter. So Flutter is a cross-platform technology which is used to build Android applications as well as iOS application. I mean, one single code we can deploy on the Android platform as well as iOS platform. Okay. So in this video, we'll discuss a concept called a shared preferences. Basically, we call in case of Android, we call as a shared preferences. The same concept in case of iOS, we call as a NS user defaults. We call. So we'll develop this application. We'll develop this application. We'll create a simple login form. We'll create with two text boxes. We'll create a simple login form. We'll create with two text boxes. We'll take the email ID from the user. What's the email ID? And we'll take the password from the user, the email address and password. Email address and password, and we'll create two buttons. We'll create one is a login and one more thing is nothing but register, or you can write insert and read buttons. You can create. Let's say for example, I'm creating two buttons. I'm creating one is a insert. So once if we click the insert button, once if you click, we want to write this email address and password. We want to write into the device storage. And when our user clicks the read button, we want to read the data from the storage. We want to read the data. I'll place one more button. We'll place called read. We'll place one more button called what? Read button. We'll place. When our user clicks the read button, whatever the data we stored in the device storage, we want to retrieve the data. We want to retrieve. Okay. So once if you click the read button, we want to read the data and we want to display the data. We want to display on these text view components. Will display the data. Will display. Okay. So we are discussing one of the storage method we are discussing in Flutter. In case of Android, the data will be stored in the shared preferences. In case of iOS, the data will be stored in the NS user defaults. Data will be stored. Okay, this is what our application requirement is. When you click insert button, write the data into the device storage. Okay, and whenever user clicks the read button, we want to read the data from. We want to read the stored data. We want to read. Okay, so let's see here how to work with this. First, we'll see with Flutter how to design the user interface. Next, after that, we'll write the code, how to write the data into the storage and how to read the data from the storage. We'll discuss. Okay. First, let's complete the UI part first. Let's start Android Studio. Let's start Android Studio, and here choose an option called Start a new Flutter project. We want to create a new Flutter project. We want to create. So choose Start a new Flutter project, and choose an option called Flutter application. Next. Specify what is the app name, and specifying, let's take, it's a Flutter storage app is a project name I specified. Flutter storage app is a project name I specified. So click on next, again next, and click on finish. So it's going to create a Flutter project. It's going to create, but by default you're going to get a template. You're going to get by default. So what we'll do is nothing but we'll remove the template. We'll remove and we'll write our own code to design that user interface. Okay. So by default, whenever you create a project, we got a Flutter template. We got by default in the main.dot file. We got some code. We got by default a template. And what we'll do is nothing but we'll remove this code. We'll remove first. We'll remove this entire code. We'll remove the entire code. I removed. Okay. Now we'll write our own code. We'll write to design this user interface. This is what the requirement is. We want to get the output like this. We want to get. Okay. So let's see here. And we know that the previous sessions we discussed already. The first statement we had to write, the import statement we had to write. We had to import the material package. We had to import. So let's write the import statement. Import. Write package material dot is a package we had to import. Okay. The next thing is execution will be begins with the main method. So we had to create the main function. We had to create. Execution will begins with what? With main function. So we had to create a main function. We had to create. In this main function, so let's call a method called run app is a method. In this main function, let's call a method called what? Run app. It is expecting the widget object as input. So we had to create a stateful widget. We had to create because we are creating the two buttons which we have in user interaction. Like when you click the button, we want to write some data and we want to read the data we want to read, and we want to get the data from the text boxes. So it's not only displaying the data. If only just for displaying the data, you can use a stateless widget. But now we require some user interactions are required here. So that's why I'm taking a stateful widget. Okay. So run app, we had to specify the widget object you had to specify. So we'll create our stateful widget object, we'll create. Let's specify class my widget, which is a child of extends. Create a class which is a child of stateful widget is a class name. In this stateful widget class, we know that it contains an abstract method. So you have to provide the implementation for that method. You have to provide the implementation. Let's provide the implementation for the method. There is one abstract method called create state is a method. Return type of this create state method is nothing but expecting the state it is expecting as a return type. So now what you have to do is nothing but we already discussed in the previous sessions. For a stateful widget, we had to create two classes. We had to create one class which is a child of stateful widget, one more class which is a child of state class. So the method is expecting, the create state method is expecting the state class object it is expecting. So we'll create one more class, we'll create called my state, which is a child of extends the state class object. Create a class my state which is a child of what? The state class object. It's also an abstract class. Let's provide the implementation for this method. We had to provide the implementation we had to provide called build method, right? Now for this create state method, we had to return the my state object. We had to return here, return my state. We are returning the my state object. We are returning here. Next, the run app method is expecting the stateless widget or stateful widget object is expecting here. We already created a stateful widget class object. We are stateful widget class we created. So we had to specify the object of my widget class object we had to give as an input parameter to the run app method. Okay. First main method will be called from the main app method, run app method we are calling. For the run app method, we created our stateful widget class object we created. That stateful widget object we are giving as an input for the run app method. Now the important thing is nothing but the return type of this, the state class build method is nothing but the widget is a return type of the build method. The previous class I already explained. Everything in Flutter we call as a widget, like a button, even a screen, a text box, a drop down menu, everything will be considered as what? Widgets. Now the return type of this build method is expecting the widget. What you want to present on the screen, we had to specify in this build return type of this build method. So you can write return. We are taking a template called material app is a template we are taking here. So we are taking template called what? Material app. So I am returning the object of what? Material app class object I am returning. In the material app, the home screen, the material app home screen. Now we required the toolbar, we required the floating action button, as well as we required the body is also required. To get this, the toolbar floating action button, and I'm creating the object for the scaffold. Scaffold is one class is there. I'm taking the template of scaffold class object I'm taking here to get the toolbar floating action button and the body support. Okay. The scaffold you can specify. Inside the scaffold we know that we can specify the app bar, we can specify one thing. The other thing is nothing but you can specify what is a body, and one more thing you can specify the floating action button. So these are the three things you can specify in the scaffold, app bar, body and the floating action button. So if you want you can specify this app bar and floating action button, otherwise these are optionals. You don't require to configure these two things, app bar as well as floating action button. If we need the floating action button and app bar support, configure these two things. Otherwise you can provide only body, and what you want to present on the screen you can specify in the body. Fine, I'm creating the object for the floating action button, new floating action button. What you want, new app bar, it's also called as what? Toolbar we call. The app bar, what you want to present, the title, what's the background color, like these kind of properties you can specify in the app bar. Okay, specifying in the app bar, you can write what is the title on the app bar. Name as storage example is a name I specified. Title. You can create the object you can create for the text class, new text. Specifying the example name as storage. Storage example is the title I specified here. Okay. If you want, you can specify what is our style and where you want to align all these properties. You can specify. Text align I specified. Text align dot center, exactly in the middle of the screen we want to show this message. Okay. If you want, you can specify the few properties you can specify: text style, like whether you want to display with the bold effect, or what is the font size, what's the font color, like these kind of properties you can specify. So font weight you can specify. The bold I specified the font weight, I specified bold. Can create the object for the text style. Style is the attribute name. I'm creating the object of the text style class. You can specify the few properties like what is a font weight, whether you want to display the bold or italic. You can specify font weight dot. You can specify bold or normal. Normal I specified. Okay. What's the color of that font? You can specify. You can write colors dot white is a color code I specified for this. Okay. So in the app bar, even if you want, you can specify the background color also. You can specify. I'm specifying some color codes for the toolbar, like colors dot. You can choose so many color codes. You can select the color code. You can select here. What's the color you want to display? You can choose a color code. You can display. I specified pink accent is the color code I specified for this. Okay. So we get application we created. So we are creating a app bar component we specified. Next, on the body of the screen, what you want to present, you have to specify. Under the body, you have to specify. So later we'll specify this, what you want to present on the body. And the floating action button, you can create the object for the floating action button class object you can create. What you want to perform when the floating action button is pressed, you can write the logic here. Later we'll specify what you want to perform when you click the floating action button. Okay. And we'll place some more properties like what is the icon you want to specify for this. You can write child. You can create the object you can create for the icon class, and what is the icon you want to display on the floating action button. You can specify the icon you can specify. There will be a class called icons. We'll get the built-in icons. You'll get so many built-in icons. You'll get which icon you want to place. You can specify the icon you can specify. I'm placing an icon called exit to app is icon I specified. What's app I specified? Exit to app is icon. This is what the app icon you are going to get. If you want, you can specify the color code for the floating action button. You can specify the color code like background color. Whatever the toolbar color code is specified, the app bar color code is specified, the same color code will specify the toolbar floating action button color code also will specify the same thing. And specifying colors dot, let's take pink accent is a color code I specified. So you create app bar we created, as well as we created the floating action button also we created. Now on the body, what you want to perform, we had to write the code here. So on the body, we want to present this user interface. We want to present like what is a email address, what is a background color, the insert button, read button. We want to create these buttons. We want to create, and whenever you click the insert button, we want to write the data into the device. Whenever user clicks the read button, we want to read the data from the device. So let's first design the UI. We'll write the functionality later. We'll see, but first we'll complete that login design. We'll complete first. Okay. So in the body, first we had to create an object for the container class object. We had to create first. We can create an object for the container class. Under the body, first we had to create an object. We had to create for what? The container class object had to create first. If you want, you can specify here the padding edge index dot all. You can specify 10. I mean, it means that the container, you can assume that the body of the screen you can assume like a container. We are creating first. We are creating one container. We are creating for this container. We specified in all the sites we want to get the 10 dp of space. We want to get in all the sites. That's why you specified here for the padding edge index dot all. We specified 10.0 is specified. Now in all the sites you're going to get a 10 pixels of space. You're going to get in all the sites for this container. But you can specify like we specified the padding. We specified for the container. Next, the child element, you can write new. We are creating a form. We are creating under that form. It is expecting on child element. It's expecting here. Under the form, it is expecting what? A child element is expecting. We can write first. You can write new center. Exactly in the middle of the screen you want to place. Inside the center, I am creating one child element called form. Again, form is expecting what? One more child element. So how many columns are available, you have to specify. So only one column only you want to present, you can specify new column. So inside the center we created one form we created. Inside the form we created one column we are creating first. Okay, we are creating what? A column we are creating. In that column, actually we want to create multiple widgets we want to create, multiple text boxes we want to create. This is one text box, another text box. Like that, multiple text boxes we want to create. So inside this column, we want to create multiple elements we want to create. So you can write children. Children is expecting the widget array. It's expecting what? The widget array it is expecting. So you can create the multiple widgets you can create under this array. We can create the multiple widgets we can create. Okay. Let's see here. Under this children widget array, first we want to create, we want to take an input from the user we want to take. For this, we had to create an object for new text form field class object we had to create. We had to create an object for the text form field class object. Okay. So in the yesterday class we discussed, if you want to get the data from this particular text box, we had to create the object for the text editing controller. We'll provide that link, that text editing controller link will provide with this text box. Now with this statement what will happen is nothing but you are going to get one text box you'll get. You'll get one text box, you'll get like this, you'll get a text box. Later if you want to get the data from this particular text box, we had to specify a controller, we had to specify text editing controller, we had to specify. So I'm creating the object, globally I'm creating the object inside the class. Before this build method, I'm creating the object I'm creating for the text editing controller class. You can write text editing controller is equals to, total we are having two text boxes. That's why I created two text editing controller objects I specified. Total we are having two text boxes. That's why I specified two text editing controller objects I specified. Now here first you have to create the object for the text form field. There will be an attribute called controller is an attribute is there. There will be an attribute called what? Controller. You can specify what is the controller name. TE1 is a controller name I specified. Further, if you want to get the data from this particular text box, you can use a TE1 we can use. That linking we are providing. To get the data from this particular text field, use the text editing controller. Next, inside the text box, we want to show that message enter email is a message we want to display. For that, you can specify like decoration as an attribute is there. You can create the object for the new. You can create the object you can create for the input decoration class. You can create the object you can create. There will be an attribute called hint text. Hint text. You can configure the message, you can configure. What is the hint you want to display? You can specify the message, you can specify. We want to display a message called enter. Email is a message we want to display. We want to display a message called what? Enter email. Right? So you created one text form field we created. We are specifying the hint called enter email is a hint we configured. Next, the next thing is nothing but we want to get some space we want to get. Next we want to create one more text field we want to create. You can copy this, give comma. After this text form field, give a comma. You can create one more text form field you can create. Enter email address and enter password. What's the text editing controller we configured for this one? TE2 is the text editing controller we configured. But if you write like this, what will happen is nothing but the both components will be there is a chance that both will be collide. A collision effect will get something like, or we'll get some overlapping issues we'll get. If you don't specify some space, if you don't apply between these two components. That's why what I'm doing is nothing but I'm creating the object I'm creating for the padding class object I'm creating. So I'm applying some space I'm applying here. Create the object for the padding class. You can specify in all the sides you want to get the padding or only in the top only you want to get. So you want to get only in the top you want to get. You can specify edge insets dot. In all the sides if you want to get, you can write edge insets dot all. Only in one particular position you want to get, you can specify edge insets dot only. You can specify here. We want to apply only in the top you want to apply. I specified 20.0 I specified. Meaning after this first text box, the next text box we are applying a 20 pixels of space we are applying between the text box as well as the next text form field. Between these two text fields, we are applying the 20 pixels of space we are applying. You can create one more Again apply the padding. So now we placed total, how many widgets we placed? Padding is one widget, text form field, again padding, again text form field. Total we created 4 widgets we created under the widget array. We created 4 widgets we created. Next after this, meaning up to now we are done up to this. We created the email text box, we created password text box, we created. Next in the next row we want to place 2 buttons we want to place in the next row. One is the insert button and one more thing is nothing but read button. We want to place these 2 buttons we want to place below of this. Now what you have to do is nothing but for this, in one single row we want to get 2 columns we want to get in one single row. See here how to get 2 columns in one single row. Here what we had to do is nothing but we had to create the object we had to create for the row class object we had to create. We had to create an object for what? Row class object we had to create. Inside the column we are creating the object we are creating for row class object we are creating. Because in one single row we want to create 2 columns we want to create. Now inside this row we can specify, there will be an attribute called children. How many widgets you want to create, you can specify the widgets you can specify here. We want to create total 2 widgets we want to create, 2 buttons we want to create here. We can specify, but before that what we will do is nothing but, okay, we are creating 2 widgets we are creating inside the row, creating an object of raised button, new raised button. What you want to perform when the button is pressed, that logic we have to write here. We'll write that logic later, we'll write what you want to perform when the button is pressed. Okay, you can specify what is the text you want to display on the button. You can specify the text you can specify. Creating the object for the text class. I want to display all insert is a text I want to display. We are creating a button called what? Insert is a button we are displaying. Next you can specify, okay, insert is a text you want to display. What is a background color for this? You can specify the color code you can specify. Pink accent is a color code you specified as a background for this. Now for this text you can specify few properties you can specify by using the text style. You can create the object you can create for the text style class. You can write few properties like what's the font weight, what's the color of the font you can specify. Okay, so you get a button we created called insert. Once if user press the insert button, what you want to perform, you have to specify an action you have to specify, and exactly you want to place in the middle of the button you want to place the text. You can specify the alignment you can specify for this. You can write text align dot center. Exactly in the middle of the button we are displaying the login insert text we are displaying. Now next immediately you can place one more button you can place, because we want to place one more button called read button we want to place. Otherwise what you can do is nothing but we'll give some space you can give on the right side, you can give some space you can give on the right side, okay, so that you can create a next button you can create. For that what we'll do is nothing but we'll create the object for the padding class, edge intersects dot only. Now you want to get in the left side, top or left, where you want to get? On the right side. The right side of this button we want to give 20 pixels of space we want to give. Next we want to place one more button we want to place. We want to place one more button we want to place. What is that one? Read is one more button we want to place. You can place a read button you can place. We created 2 buttons we created. One is the insert button, one more thing is what? Read button. So these 2 buttons we placed under what? One single row we placed these 2 buttons we placed. So this is also done. Next what is the next thing is nothing but we want to place, these 2 buttons also done. We are able to place the insert button as well as we are able to place a read button. The next thing is nothing but we had to place these 2, the 2 labels had to place below of these two button components. Had to place 2 labels had to place. And what we'll do is nothing but initially we'll take 2 string variables we'll take, like for example string, what's the email value, we can write some, initially you can give some empty text you can specify initially, later we'll update with the actual text we'll update later. string email and password I specified, 2 string variables we taken initially. Okay. Now here after this row creation, new row is there, right? Inside the row we created 2 buttons we created. After this row creation, after completion of the row, what we'll do is nothing but we'll create 2 labels we'll create. So you can write one more child element called new text and give comma. So we'll end new text. What's the value you want to display? You can specify the value. You can write dollar. One is a email, meaning whatever the value is there in the email variable, that value you want to display. Initially, what is the value we stored in the email variable? We stored some empty text we stored. Whatever the value is there in the email variable, we want to display that value, we want to display. Later we'll update the text, we'll update later. If you want, you can specify few properties like the alignment, text align.center I specified. If you want, you can specify the style of the text style, you can specify the few properties you can specify here, like what's a style, color code and all you can configure here. You can specify font weight dot. So we specified the font weight, we specified normal, we specified exactly in the middle of the screen we are displaying. Okay. So we are not specified any color code. So by default we will get it the black color code, we will get the text. Okay. This is one component we want to create, one text component, and same like this we want to create one more text component also we want to display. But here we will display the password value will display. And between these two things we want to get some space we want to get, otherwise we will get some the UI conflicts we will get. Okay. So we'll take a padding, we'll apply some padding property, we'll apply in the top. Between these two text tree components, we are applying some padding, we are applying these two text tree components. And here also better we applied the padding we applied, meaning on top of this email text also, below of this buttons we applied some padding, we applied 20 pixels of space, then we created one label we created for displaying the email value, one more label we created for displaying the password value. Okay. So we are done with the UI part, we are done. So we have not written the storage functionality, we have not written it. We are going to use a concept called packages concept we use for that. But here just we are done with the UI part, we are done first. So what we will do is nothing but we will run the application, will run. So let's see whether the UI we got in the expected format or not, we got the UI, we will check that first. And once we got the UI, once if we get as an expected format, once we get the UI, then we will write the code for the insert and read code we will write. Okay. So let's test the application in both platforms, Android as well as iOS first UI. I selected the iOS simulator first. I selected first. Let's run the application on the iOS simulator. So first opening the iOS simulator, I am opening first. So we'll take some time to open this iOS simulator. Okay, we'll wait for some time. So now the simulator as well as emulator both are ready. First I opened the simulator as well as emulator. First I opened the emulator and simulator. And now we are testing the app in the simulator I am testing. I selected the iPhone device I selected and click on this run button. Okay, I selected the run button I selected. So it is installing the app in the iOS simulator. And once you get the output in the simulator, the same application will run on the Android emulator also will run the same application. So you got the output, you got in both platforms, you got the output, you got insert as well as read button. So the UI is fine. And which format we are expecting the UI, we got the same, we got the user interface we got. Except one thing, we specified the background color code we specified for these two buttons. Actually we specified the pink accent is the color code we specified as a background for these two buttons. So try once with this color code for the raised button. So we are done with the UI, we are done. Actually we are done with the UI except that color. Okay. Now what we will do is nothing but whenever user clicks the insert button, so whatever the data we inserted in these two text boxes, the email and password, these two text boxes, we want to write the data into storage, we want to write the data. And whenever user clicks the read button, again we want to read the data from the storage, we want to read the data. So here for this what we had to do is nothing but in case of Android, for this we have a concept called shared preferences. But in case of iOS, we are having a concept called NS user defaults. But here we are using a Flutter, we are using a cross-platform technology. We had to write the code only once. We had to write the code. In case of Android, the data has to be stored in shared preferences. In case of iOS, the same data has to be write in the NS user defaults. So if you want to write this data in the storage, we had to take a support called packages support. We had to take, like basically Flutter is providing the support for designing the user interface. Like if you want to perform some, if you want to work with some components like location, the web view, shared preferences, SQLite database, or web services. So for all these concepts, the Flutter is providing a packages it is providing here, like how we got the material package by default when you create a Flutter project. So now what you have to do is nothing but if you want to work with the shared preferences, we had to import the Flutter package you had to import for the shared preferences. So for this, what we'll do is just go through the flutter.io one first. Go through the URL called flutter.io. Go through the URL called what? Flutter.io. In the Flutter welcome page, you can see the option called packages is an option is there in the Flutter page. You can see an option called packages. In Flutter, you can see an option called what? Packages is an option you can see here. Click on packages. Once if you click on the packages, once if you click on it, you can see the n number of packages you can see here. Shared preferences and path provider, cloud file store. Like that we are having different packages we are having, like Google sign-in, image picker, connectivity, video player. Like that we are having different packages we are having. So here we want to work with a package we want to work called shared preferences. So you have to choose a concept called what? Shared preferences. So once if you choose the shared preferences package, once if you select, you can see the description you can see here. Flutter plugin for reading and writing the simple key value pairs wraps NS user defaults on iOS and shared preferences concept on Android. So now you want to work with the shared preferences. So choose an option called what? Shared preferences is the option you have to select first. You have to choose an option called what? Shared preferences. In this shared preferences, now you can see the description here. It's going to write the data in case of Android on shared preferences. In case of iOS, it's going to write the data on the NS user defaults. There are so many packages. Just you had to search, or a package you had to search. Location, web view, connectivity in case of Wi-Fi, and Firebase database, Firebase storage, Flutter Redux. Like that we are having different packages we are having. So you want to work with a package called shared preferences, click on the shared preferences package. So once if you select the shared preferences package, once if you select, now first what you had to do is nothing but we had to add this Flutter dependency we had to add. See here you can see the description. To use the plugin, add shared preferences project as a dependency in your public specified.yaml file. What you had to do here? We had to add this shared preferences plugin we had to add as a dependency in the your public specified.yaml file. So now first what you had to do is nothing but in our project we had to identify that file. We had to identify public specified.yaml file. You can see here public specified.yaml file. In this file, this public specified.yaml file, already one dependency is already added. You can see one dependency is already added here called the Cupertino icons version 0.1.2 is a version is already added. Already this plugin is already added, right? So same like this plugin, we had to add one more plugin we had to add. We had to add one more plugin called what? We had to add the shared preferences plugin also we had to add. Simply what you can do is nothing but here you can add one more plugin we can add here. So simply you can copy your plugin name, you can copy. What's the plugin name? Shared preferences. The version of this shared preferences is nothing but 0.4.2 is a version name. So simply you can add this plugin, you can add here, copy and paste. But here the configure same as it is. Shared preferences is a plugin name. The shared preferences is what? The plugin name. The version of this shared preferences plugin is nothing but we had to, what's the version of this shared preferences plugin? 0.4.2 is the plugin name. Configure the shared plugin name. Shared preference is a plugin name, and the version of this shared preferences plugin is what? 0.4.2 is a version of the shared preferences plugin. Once you do some changes there, in the top you can get an option, you can see in the top you can get called packages get is an option is there. Click on the packages get, like whatever the packages you added, those packages will download from the Flutter package will download, the project will download package. So running the Flutter package get. Okay, so click on the packages get. So it's required what are the packages you configured, will download those packages will be get. Fine. Now we added the Flutter plugin, we added shared preferences plugin we added to Flutter we added. Now the requirement is we created two buttons we created here, insert button and read button. Whenever user clicks the insert button, we want to write the data into storage, I mean the shared preferences in case of Android, NS user defaults in case of iOS. Whenever user clicks the read button, we want to read the data from the shared preferences or NS user defaults. Now here what we had to do is, when you press the insert button, we specified on pressed null we configured. Now we had to specify what you want to perform when the button is pressed. So let's see here in the Flutter documentation for the shared preferences, how can we write the data. Now first what you had to do is nothing but to work with shared preferences, we had to import this shared preferences dot package, you had to import first. So in your dot file, the first statement we had to import shared preferences, but unfortunately still that package is not downloaded still. So that's why it's showing the option, a warning message is showing here. You can see an option called get dependencies. Click on the get dependencies. It's showing the public specified dot as modified. So do you want to get the dependencies? I click on the dependencies, I clicked. It is running that Flutter. It's downloading the dependency, it is downloading here. It will take some time to download. Once it is done, you can import that shared preferences library file, you can import here. Package you can import. Let's search for the shared preferences now. Yeah, now the dependencies we got. We had to import the dot file, we had to import called shared preferences dot file, we had to import. Right, this is the first step we had to do. We had to import this, the shared preferences dot file we had to import first. The next thing is nothing but whenever you press this button, they are calling a function called increment counter is a function they are calling. They are calling a function called what? Increment counter. But our requirement is nothing but we want to write the data into shared preferences. So you can see a method call. First you had to get the get shared preferences object you had to get first. Then they are setting some integer value they are setting here, the counter value they are setting. Now what you had to do is nothing but we had to specify the string type of values you had to set. So first what we will do is nothing but we will create two functions we will create. If you want, you can copy this function, you can copy same as it is. You can copy the function, you can copy and copy that function in our my state class. Inside our my state class, I copied the function I copied. But instead of increment counter function, I am specifying the function name called insert is a function name I specified. What's the function name? Insert is a function name I specified. Get the shared preferences object, get the shared preferences object, and after getting the shared preferences object, now we want to write the data we want to write. The first thing we want to write the data, email data we want to write. That email text box value we will get from the text editing controller we will get. Now you can write, because what is we specified T1 is a text editing controller we specified for the text box. You can write T1.text.toString. Okay. So we are writing the email data, we are writing in the shared preferences, we are writing the email data. I think calling the text directly will get the string type of data we will get. You don't require to call explicitly toString. So, and here what is the method name? Set string is a method name. Set string is a method. The text editing controller one value we are storing, as well as we want to store the password value also we want to store. Email, password, text editing 2.text. Okay. So see here, this is what the nodes, this is what the code. By using this statement, we are writing the data into shared preferences, we are writing the data. In the same way, by using this code, we are writing the data into what? Shared preferences, we are writing the data we are writing. In the same way, we had to create one more function we had to create called read is another function we had to create. I had to create one more function called what? Read function. But here we want to read the data from the shared preferences. So for this, what you have to do is nothing but for reading the data from the shared preferences, you can see getInt is a method in case of integer type of value. Now we store the string type of value. So you had to call the getString method, you had to call. Now we had to call a method called preferences dot. There is a method called getString. GetString of what is a key, email is a key we configured, and getString of password is a key we configured. GetString. Now this email address value and password value we stored into, we already created two variables we already created. This email and password we created two variables we created. We'll store the values into these variables. We'll store like email is equals to, password is equals to. Okay, I'm getting the email address I'm getting and password I'm getting. So these values we are getting from shared preferences. Now you don't require to write this. Wait. So by using this statement, we are reading the data from the shared preferences, and after calling the read method, we had to call a method called setState method. We had to call, meaning we had to update, we had to reload the data. We had to reload, because once if you click the read button, we are getting the data from the shared preferences. The data we stored into email address and password. This email address and password value we are updating to two text view components. We are updating here. So it has to update the data. It has to update. That's why I'm calling a method called what? setState method. I'm calling here to update the data. These are the two methods. Insert and read are the two methods. These methods we had to call. When we had to call these two methods, whenever user clicks these two buttons here, when user press the insert button, earlier we specified on pressed null, right? Now we had to call a function. We had to call here, call insert function. We had to call, and whenever user press the read button, whenever user press, we had to call a function called read is a function we had to call. We want to call the insert function, and we want to call the read function. We want to call, specify the function names, insert function and read function. Okay, so if you need this node support, if you need, just go through that URL called gast.github.com. Whatever the program I written, just go through this URL gast.github.com/MAHA1108. You can see the notes, you can see the Flutter notes, you can see here the last. Okay, so now we are discussing about this fifth example. We are discussing how to store the data in what? In the shared preferences. Okay, so the code you can see. Fine. Now we are done with the shared preferences code. We are done. The storage code we are done. In case of Android, the data will be right in the shared preferences. In case of iOS, the same data will be run on the NS user defaults. We'll test the application. We'll test. I'm testing the app in the Android. Okay, let's choose the run button. We're testing the app in the emulator. We are testing the app. You can specify the mail ID. You can specify now. So we'll see how to write the data, and as well as we'll see how to read the data. Okay. So given some email ID I specified mahesh.cubex@gmail.com, and I specified password test@123 is the password I specified. Once if you click the insert button, once if you click, the data will be stored in the shared preferences. Data will be stored, right? Once if you click the insert button, data will be stored in the shared preferences. Data will be stored, and if you press the read button, once if you press, whatever the data we stored in the shared preferences, we are retrieving the data. We are retrieving directly. We are not retrieving the data from these text boxes. We stored the data in the shared preferences. By clicking on the read button, we are reading the data from the shared preferences. If you want just for confirmation, this is a permanent storage. The shared preferences will be a permanent storage. Until you uninstall the application, data will be there in the shared preferences. If you want, you can see here, I close the app, I close, and you can reopen the app, you can reopen. This is our application name, Flutter storage. I close the application, I close, and I'm reopening the application, I reopen. And if you press the read button, once if you press, you can read the data from the storage. Because this will be what? A permanent storage in the device. Until you uninstall the application, data will be stored in the shared preferences. You can click on the read button, you can click. Once if you click the read button, see we got the data we got from the shared preferences. The same thing in case of iOS, the same output you will get in case of iOS also. The data will be stored in the NS user defaults, and the data will be read from the NS user defaults. Same like shared preferences, iOS is having a NS user defaults. Okay, let's try to work on up to this. Okay, so we'll get an idea how to use the packages concept in the Flutter. Okay, thank you.